Well, hi. Wanted to answer a question from Tumblr. I haven't done a video answer in quite a while. Please forgive me, my voice is a little hoarse. Anyway, more TT asked this question. How do you think about the state of dialogue system in RPGs? Some says it doesn't evolve much in the past decades as it needs to be, and the developer should not be content in branching dialogue system. Some says branching dialogue is an evolutionary dead end and should take a different approach. What's your take on it? Have you and Obsidian considered different approaches? Do you think it is better to further refine the current form for the time being, well, before the super AI? No, we haven't explored much beyond branching dialogue. Um, I'll get to all the reasons why, but we really haven't. I don't think that our writers really feel that branching dialogue it's an evolutionary dead end in the sense that, yes, eventually when we have AIs that are as advanced as the human brain, then we will no longer perhaps need to author author anything. We could just have AIs create storylines and characters all on their own. And in fact, I think recently there was actually a film that was a screenplay that was written by an AI, and it was not good, but it's getting there. I mean, every AI has to go through stages where it is not good before it gets better. So AI, I think, is the future. But let's talk about why we still use branching dialogue at Obsidian and why branching dialogue is still used by BioWare and Bethesda and Telltale and all sorts of other studios, and why people use it for Twine. They basically use Twine for branching dialogue, and a lot of people take a lot of pleasure in doing so. So the question that I have sort of surrounding this is, what do you want out of reactive dialogue? What's the point in having dialogue that is reactive? So if we're not going to write static dialogue, meaning, for example, if you were to play Drake's Fortune or something like that, you would find, it's like a movie script. There's a little bit of maybe like incidental reactivity, but for the most part, it's a story that is written practically like a film. Obviously, it's not identical, but it follows most conventions that you would find in a film. It's not reactive. Characters are formed ahead of time. They say what they're going to say to each other. There's a script. They follow it. So if we're not making that, if we're making reactive dialogue, then what's the point? Why do we even want reactive dialogue in the first place? So I made a list of a few things, reasons why at Obsidian, why we like using reactive dialogue. One, from the beginning, we want to have, and this applies whether it's reactive or not, we want to have a distinct character voice in the setting. So this isn't specific to reactive dialogue, but it's important that we not lose sight of it in reactive dialogue. A dialogue that is reactive but has a character with no really distinct voice is losing something that people enjoy in writing. They want to read characters who feel like they have their own sense of being. And when you read a few lines from that character, you know immediately who that character is. So we want to make sure that even if we're writing reactive dialogue, the characters have their own voice. We want to convey specific pieces of information. Obviously, again, this does not have to be in reactive dialogue, but a reactive dialogue must do this at some point because that's how you usually progress quests and world states and things like that. They need to convey information about quests. They need to convey information about the setting, and we also want them to react to changes within the setting. These can be things that the player has done individually, or they can be world state changes. For example, you went from Act 1 to Act 2, and now when you go back through the area, people are talking about things that have changed based on the passage of time, or more appropriately, the main game state. We also, most importantly, within a reactive dialogue, we want characters to believably react to characteristics and expressions of the PC's character. This means the range of personality that we want to support within the game, from a complete psycho to an angelic saint and everything in between, and a range of background. You can be an elf, you can be a dwarf, you can be a man, you can be a woman, you can be all sorts of different things, you can be all sorts of character classes, you can dress in different ways, you can behave in different ways. So we want these characters to react to all of these things, and we want to do it while they retain their own voice within the setting, meaning that character in their voice will react to all of these things based on who they are and how and who you are. And they're also doing all of this while they're conveying a bunch of information. Currently, this requires human beings to write all of this stuff. It requires human beings to curate exactly what is going to go into that dialogue, because not everybody can react to everything. Not everybody can talk about everything, nor do you really want to talk to everyone about everything. And not everyone is really appropriate to be giving information about everything. So this requires writers to construct a map of how the dialogues will branch. So the question is, or rather I should say, one of the criticisms is that branching dialogue has not evolved much. That is not true. I would say that from the player-facing side, it doesn't seem like it's evolved very much, because ultimately what a player is seeing is maybe different interfaces, like there's a dialogue wheel instead of a list. That's hardly really an advancement. The artistic presentation, the cinematic camera angles, all that sort of stuff, that's an improvement. There might be other elements in there, but I would say on the player side of things, it doesn't seem like it's evolved very much, simply from the perspective of the player experience. On the development side of things, it's changed quite a bit. Our tools, and I'm saying collectively, I mean, what's true for Obsidian, is also true in certain parts for BioWare and Bethesda. We have improved our tools, which means our interfaces for actually writing dialogues have become much better. Our tools for tracking and authoring scripts that fire and check conditionals within dialogues, those have also improved a great deal, as has our ability to track data to see, for example, how many times do we check a specific stat? Are we ever checking this global variable anywhere? Where? How many times? Also, our processes have matured, and they allow us to have better and more peer review and more consistent standards. So writing reactive dialogue has its own set of standards at any given company. You're not going to write it like you're writing a normal movie script. There are certain ways that you structure things and try to get things to flow for the best player experience. And over time, those of us who worked back at Black Isle, including Chris Avalon, who established a large number of our standards that we still use at Obsidian to this day, we learned certain things over time, and we learned this works really well, this works very badly. Don't do these things, try to do these things as much as possible. And when you have better pipelines and you have better standards, it also allows you to have more time to review these things to I don't want to say an objective standard, but to a consistent standard for your studio and your project. So on the authorship side, branching dialogue has improved a great deal. And since currently, barring dramatic improvements in AI, you're not going to suddenly see dialogue just write itself or characters form themselves with a distinct voice, the best that we can do is to make the process of writing dialogue much easier and better for those who are working in that environment. That being said, AI is the next step, because the major bottlenecks are authorship. Usually what we find is it takes time to find a voice for a character. It takes time to find all of the ways in which we want a dialogue to go. It takes time to find all the places where it feels like a player is going to want to say something or is going to want an NPC to reasonably react to something about them, whether it's their appearance, their background, the nation they're from, anything. It takes time to iterate on that and find all of that. If you had an AI that knew all of these very, very fluid rules that go through the minds of narrative designers, then an AI could just construct that themselves. They can construct stories themselves. Certainly there are designers who have set out to make storytelling engines or storytelling games where there is for lack of a better term, a story manager that sort of looks at the rules of how stories work and how character motivations work and try to put them together, often in a very abstract sense. But it's trying to do essentially artificial intelligence. It's trying to create this stuff more or less by itself or react rather than having someone author it. What designers are authoring is a set of rules, and it reacts to that. I think it will still be a while before we get to that point, but I think it can be done. In the meantime, you can ask, well, why isn't Obsidian doing it? I can't speak for everyone. I am the design director, but I don't decide what everyone's choosing to do. Most of our writers, they enjoy pushing the boundaries of branching dialogue. The people who write like to write, And we're not trying to find artificial intelligence to replace us because then it means we're not writing anymore. And since our goal is to create great stories driven by great characters, if we were not able to do that ourselves, we would, even if there were an AI system that could theoretically do it, someone is still going to have to make the rules for that AI to make those great characters and those great stories. And if we weren't able to do that, then we wouldn't be able to make that AI in the first place. But because we believe that we can, more or less, that is what we pursue. We want to write those characters. We want to write those stories. We want to define the boundaries in which characters can exist, that players can make them exist over time, and how characters react to them. And the majority of our fans don't seem to really believe that branching dialogue in and of itself is a dead end. I haven't really seen many players say, oh, I hate branching dialogue. I mean, usually what I'll see is they hate certain aspects of how we author it or how another studio authors it, and they'll say like, I don't like it when the dialogue goes this way, or I don't like that these not enough characters responded to this thing about my character. And that usually means to us is that we look at it and we say like, you know what, we should give more attention to this because it just feels natural. It feels like something that the player should expect given the circumstances. As an example, in Pillars of Eternity, people who played a priest of Aethys a lot of them said like, well, there's a lot of stuff going on with the god Aethys in this setting. Why don't you react to the fact that my character is a priest of Aethys? And so that's something where if you look at it strictly from the perspective of equal representation, sure, maybe each priest deity got, X number of replies, but it really felt like Aethasian priests should just get more. So that's what I mean. It's like sometimes it's a subjective call. Most of the time it's a subjective call. I mean, that's what all of this writing process is about. So I believe that someday, assuming we live that long, we'll get to the point where AI can do a lot of this stuff. But until then, I enjoy writing branching dialogues. The narrative designers I work with enjoy using branching dialogue and pushing it in new and exciting ways. And I will say that on every project I've worked on where we've had a new set of tools, it's given us a new perspective on things that we can do and ways that we can extend that reactivity to make players feel like it's a really rich and engrossing experience and more reactive than anything that's come before, or so we hope. Thanks.